Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about Clarke Griffin, the main protagonist of the science fictional show, The 100. Obviously, I'm going to be kind of, breaking down certain aspects about Clarke's character that I find interesting, that I, will involve me going into spoilers. So if you've not seen the entirety of The 100, because I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff from all over the series, I highly recommend you don't watch this video for spoiler reasons. I even highly recommend, if you have never seen The 100, now's a great time to watch it because the entire show, all 7 seasons, are currently on Netflix if you decide that you want to binge it. So now, Clarke has always been this very interesting character, and obviously we've seen how that character has grown over the course of the series, because it's always been the thing that Clarke has always tried to do what she thought was right. And that's always been the complicated thing. And I think this isn't something that just applies to Clarke. It applies to so many characters in the series, but obviously Clarke is the primest example of, doing some wrong for the right reason. So for the fact of the matter is, for example, Clarke is the most burdened hero that you will find, because she's always had to carry the sins of what she's done. Because, it's always that complicated thing, like I said, a lot of characters in the show do. It's the whole thing of, protecting who you care about most. Obviously, Clarke is trying to put that aside and try to look at the greater good in many different situations, especially, when it was Sky Crew versus Tree Crew, she was the one working with Lexa to kind of bridge that gap. In fact, she's the one that changed Lexa for the best. But it's still the thing that she ended up having to make a lot of hard choices that ended up weighing on her. Because, you think about where she started at the beginning of the series, that she was the one that was kind of obviously when Bellamy and the others were just kind of, Bellamy in particular were kind of letting the 100 kind of run rampant. She was the one trying to rein everyone in. She was kind of trying to be the conscience of the group. And so you saw her as a better fit as a leader, but then obviously there's the whole thing of her and Bellamy gelling together eventually and becoming the good friends and allies and co-leaders that they eventually became. But it was the thing of one thing after another, her making choices that she tried to, it was always a thing of, if I have to, I'm going to try to do what's best for everyone, but at the end of the day, I'm going to look after the people that are important to me. The greatest example the first example that comes to mind is the whole Mount Weather situation. She killed the entirety of Mount Weather. Now, that was a situation she was forced into, because maybe there was a better way, who knows, but she made the choice that I'm going to protect the people I care about, or the people from Mount Weather are going to kill everyone I know and care about. So what choice did she really have? Granted, Bellamy was there to share that burden with her, but it was still obviously that choice weighed heavy on her, and she kind of, left on her own for a while. Sending, some of her friends to space so that she could stay behind, making that choice so that they were okay. So it's always that thing of, she always puts other people first, but you could always make the argument that she's selfish because she's actually putting her own needs first, and her needs are to protect the people she cares about. So that's always a complicated thing about her as a hero, is that, heroes are supposed to be selfish, which in a way she is, but at the same time she is selfish in her own selflessness. It's almost an oxymoron within itself, and I think that's the complexity of her character. When it came to how far she was willing to go to protect Maddie, betraying people that she cared about, if it meant, protecting Maddie. Obviously that led to the situation with Raven and everything, and obviously Raven ended up despising her for that decision. Obviously the whole thing with the Primes possessing people's body and everything. So it's a thing of who are you to judge these people's way of living, but it's still kind of an effed up way, so it's you're in the right in that situation, but at the same time it's you destroy the foundation of what was this people's way of life for so long. But it's even that's a complicated thing in itself. But I still think she was 100% in the right in that regard, because they were wrong, because obviously they built themselves up to be some gods, when in actuality it was technology that allowed them to have their immortality. But then also at the final stage of it all, kind of looking at the final season, there's even a situation of, that, once again, that running theme of them doing whatever it takes to protect their people. It's that love and obsession and need to protect and do whatever you can for your people has led to you fighting and killing, and so many people dying because of your need to protect the people you care about. Eventually, at what point do you have because even that's something, like I said, she struggled with being is that all we are? Are we just looking for the next fight? Can we be better? Can we do better? And that's always the thing, Clarke, like I said, tries to do the best thing that she feels like she can. She tries to do everything so everything works out on all fronts, but she's usually backed into a corner where it's like, okay, do I look out for everyone's best interest, or do I look out for the people I care about best interest? But even in the final season, I feel like everything she did in the final season is like, no, screw everyone else. I'm only in this for the people that are family and friends to me. Especially having lost her mom the previous season. Like, obviously, it made her probably clutch onto it even more. I gotta protect what's mine because I'm not going to lose another person I care about. Obviously, having to go as far as killing her best friend. Her and Bellamy, like, they've been a team, a squad since the beginning of the show. Yeah, they've had their ups and downs over the course of everything. Obviously, like, when he came back from space, obviously she wasn't the same because she was willing to do whatever to protect Maddie. So, but obviously, like, different people handle different things, because obviously Bellamy was so lost in everything because of just everything they went through that he needed something to latch onto. And as I think it was like Octavia said it, like, he needed, or either him or it was either Octavia or Echo that said, like, he needed everything to have a meaning. And I think the same thing could be said for Clarke, and for her, that meaning was protecting the people I care about. No matter what I have to do, no matter what kind of burden, whatever cross I have to bear, no matter who I have to kill, if it means protecting the people I care about, I will shoulder that burden. To the point at the very end of the series, what do we have? Clarke alone, because she stayed behind because the rest of humanity could be, brought past the test. But hell, you're the one being, apparently, of all the beings that have taken the test that actually killed someone during the test, because obviously she was so consumed by revenge because of what Bill did to Maddie. That's always been the driving force behind a lot of what Clarke, like I said, Clarke has done. It's been, in response to something that's happened to people that she cares about, in the need of protecting those people she cares about. Once again, everyone realizing it's sad that, like, Clarke has always been the one who has to shoulder those burdens, having to live with the fact is that she killed Bellamy. Bellamy will never get to become a part of the light because he died beforehand. And so knowing that, like, your friend never found peace, but maybe in some shape or form she could try to think that maybe he did, because it's a complicated thing. At least now she knows, like, Maddie's happy and safe, and obviously she's reunited with a lot of her friends and family, like everyone else ended, because they weren't going to leave Clarke behind, because Clarke sacrificed so much for them. So it's like, how is it fair for us to kind of be kicking and enjoying, like, being a part, being this light, being all this other stuff without you, who sacrificed so much, who sacrificed her own soul so that we could keep it. Keep ours. I don't know. I think it's such an interesting display of just, like, the burdens a hero has to take, because, like, I guess you can all borderline, like, I think she's a hero, but I think at the same time, like, Clarke could definitely fall in that category, maybe like an anti-hero in that regard. I would never, like, think of her as a villain, even though she would kind of get labeled as one sometimes. But I think it's always, once again, people always talk about the hard decisions, and Clarke has always been the one forced in that position. She's sometimes forced in that position, but a lot of times she, like I said, takes upon herself so no one else has to. It's like, I think Clarke kind of thought of it like, I'm already way past redemption. And it makes you wonder, like, at any point in time, would there ever be any making up for all that she's done? We actually think about it in a sense, like, she had literally genocided an entire group of people, the whole Mount Weather situation. Plus, because of her, an entire Earth ended up in the mess up situation it was for a very, very long time. Hence why Monty made it so that, like, they ended up going, could never return. He was like, yeah, like, Earth never recovered, so we're gonna have to find somewhere else to be. Obviously, we see, because of the final season, eventually Earth got fixed, but that's only because, like, time works differently and stuff like that. And probably, like, the time they spent getting to, like, Sanctum and all that, like, in that time frame, like, Earth probably got fixed, plus probably, like, the time differences between the different, like, worlds and stuff like that probably played a role in it. But still, like I said, just regardless of everything, it's just an interesting and complicated thing. I think that's because obviously that's a representation of the show in its entirety, of just, like, how complicated human beings can be. It is that whole situation of we do what we need to survive right now. There's a whole statement about, obviously that was a back and forth between, like, Abby and Kane about we'll get our humanity back afterwards, but it's like, when it's all said and done, like, is that possible? You go, how much are you willing to sacrifice your own soul and humanity? And, like, when the time comes, could you ever get it back? I'm not trying to say that Clarke ever lost hers, but it's still that thing of, like, it's the thing of like there's wrong and right to it, because you know it's like, oh, protecting the people you care about, that can't be wrong, but when you have to go about it the way Clarke did, it does make it wrong. That, you know, you're willing to put, I mean, now, and that was a whole complicated thing of like, are you willing to put the people that matter to you most above the human race as a whole? I mean, granted, Bill had a cult, he made it seem like he was a good guy and all this, he really wasn't, but still, it's just kind of a thing of like, he was wrong, but there was some right to what he said, and also the whole thing about Clarke, that there's right with what she does, but there's also wrong with what she does. So it's I mean, and I think that's kind of the whole messaging behind the show, is just like the conflictedness of, you know, it's almost like you can't do, there will always be consequences no matter what you do. It just comes down to what you're okay with living with. You know, it's actually interesting because I made that whole point earlier about redemption and stuff like that for Clarke's redemption, because part of me was thinking like, well, doesn't she kind of get the win in the end because humanity got, but then I'm like, no, because her in particular, she jeopardized their chances of surviving and being, you know, considered like, you know, passing the test and all that stuff, because of what she did and who she was, being the representative of humanity. And it's like obviously her complicated past, it actually ended up being Octavia, because it's interesting because saving humanity ended up being Octavia's redemption and not Clarke's. But you can make the argument the reason why it's that situation plays out is that it is still Clarke's redemption to a certain extent, because she made sure all her friends and family and the people she cares about are taken care of. But it's like she made the sacrifices so that they didn't have to like carry a lot. I mean, granted, Octavia had her own demons, obviously she had to deal with the whole blood rain situation, still, you know, clawed at her even after all these years later. But it's still that thing of that despite all that, like her blood rain and stuff, not as bad, you know, I'm sure it's debatable as Clarke's whole situation. So it's just interesting when you really break that down. I mean, but the whole point of this video was just me you know, breaking down this character, just talking about her in general. And I just, you know, like I said, these are just kind of my thoughts about, you know, Clarke Griffin. I'd love to get to know your thoughts. Where do you kind of side on things? I don't know if this is going to be like a hero or villain. Probably not. It's probably just going to be like a character breakdown, just some random nerd mode broken down video. But I'd be curious, like, where you stand on Clarke. Do you see her more as a hero? Do you see her more as a villain? Do you understand the sacrifices that she made, you know, despite the things she had to do to, you know, save and protect the people she cared about? I'd love to know your thoughts about everything, because I'm sure different people have different perspectives on the whole Clarke Griffin situation. So let me know yours. Really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.